Jeff, I am so excited for this. I've loved much of your writing before, so thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Not at all, but I want to dive straight in and a little bit on you. So, how did you make your way into the world of startups? And then, how did you make your way most recently to be a GP at Andreessen?
The world of startups was, quasi accidental. I was working at Disney, and it was a great time to be at Disney. Frank Wells and Michael Eisner were there. The company was doing great, but then the internet came along, and was just it's like you had to get into it. So I jumped out of Disney. I was CFO of the Disney stores, became CFO of a publicly traded retail company called Hollywood Entertainment that had just bought Reel.com, the superstore for DVDs and VHS tapes, with the idea of doing video on demand. It was a great idea. It was about 2 decades too soon, and Netflix ended up doing it after. But that got me into tech, and then I just found I loved it, and I stayed.
I want to ask, you have the most incredible operating career, as we touched on there. How do you think your operating career positively impacted how you think as an investor today?
Well, when the big job upgrade for me was when I went to eBay and got to manage eBay.com. Meg Whitman was my hiring manager at Disney way back in the day, and was looking for talent, and all the talent as the bubble grew, all the talent in Silicon Valley was grabbed up. So she went and found me and brought me into Silicon Valley. And so I think doing eBay early meant there was no playbook. We had to write the playbook, and you get to know a business at such an atomical way. You're just building it from the ground up, and you're making a ton of mistakes. You're trying to correct them, and getting that level of involvement in the network effect business, I think, gave me a pretty good sense for, okay, this business has the potential to replicate that network effect. This business doesn't, and largely as an investor, I'm a kind of a one-trick pony. Everything I would like to talk about as an operator and an investor, it typically involves a network effect.
Can I ask, on the flip side, are there struggles or challenges with having had such operational experience and success, and now, someone said it well to me the other day, which is like eyes on, hands off?
Yes, that's a very important question for an operator who goes into an investor. Do they want to? Reid Hoffman once described it to me. I'm in the passenger seat, and I don't want to grab the wheel. The entrepreneur has to be steering, and I think that's a pretty good metaphor. I had gotten to the point where I did not want to operate any more tech businesses. I had scratched that itch after well over a decade running them, and so now I appreciate the efforts and commitment of my entrepreneurs. But I'm not tempted to grab that steering wheel.
Can I ask, do you think there's a danger, and I have this danger now, advising founders, especially on content, where I tell them what has worked for me, and it may be very different for them? Do you find that actually playbooks have changed so much that it makes a lot of operating experience actually irrelevant? Something I worry about.
I try never to be prescriptive. You should do this. I try to say, in my experience, I faced something similar. I tried A, B, and C, and here's what happened. But I don't want the entrepreneur to do what I say, because then I'm spending 1/20th of my time thinking about their business. If I picked well, they should be making a decision. I just appreciate being listened to, and have that perspective considered. But the last thing I want is an entrepreneur who'll do whatever I say they should do.
You mentioned not being prescriptive there. I think one of the biggest problems with venture today is venture investors, who especially haven't been operators, are too nervous to tell founders the truth because they don't want a bad NPS. Or what I hear, it's a bad look, Harry. And I'm like, fuck, it's a bad look. You have a fiduciary duty, and you have a responsibility to your team and to the shareholders to say, Jeff, this is not working. We need to change. And you may not want to hear it.
And I agree with that. And you have a responsibility to your entrepreneur. If you think you think there's a high probability they're going to drive the car over the cliff, you owe it to them to talk to them about it, about that concern. I may not be right, but hey, please pay attention here. This could unfold. So for me, it's a privilege to have the opportunity to discuss the meaningful things with the entrepreneur.
Jeff, how do you do? You've got the operator experience, right? You sat on boards with investors who would give you advice. How would you give advice like that, which is very hard to hear, with empathy, but also with real direction?
Exactly, with empathy and with real direction. I mean, it is, there was a mindset shift I made back when I was an operator to have the tough conversations. It is in the other party's interest to have that conversation. If you want them to be successful in the org, you owe it to them to have the hard conversations. And when you kind of put that lens on it, it's like I'm being charitable by empathetically sharing, that point of view, and it makes the conversation a whole lot easier.
No, I totally agree with you, especially in terms of it being in favor of the entrepreneur. I do want to move to marketplace. We're going to break down marketplaces first with like an overview, and then demand, and then supply. I have a structure to this show, which actually is quite a rarity for me. So I listened to you on other podcasts, and you said that there were two things really that you look for in terms of characteristics that make a great marketplace. Number one was fragmentation of supply side. What did you mean by this, and why is this so important to you?
So I had a very interesting conversation on this with another entrepreneur at one point. I always contrasted OpenTable with Fandango. And so Fandango, there are there 6 or 7 major movie chains in the United States. Aggregating that supply was very straightforward. It's like, okay, that's great. The challenge is if there are only 6 or 7 major suppliers, each of those suppliers has supplier power. So I remember I used to go to AMC, and one day they weren't in Fandango. So what did I do? I went to AMC.com and made the reservation. OpenTable, by contrast, had the target market was 30 or 40 or 50,000 restaurants, almost all of which had one. The owner only managed one restaurant. And so it was brutally hard to aggregate. But once you're aggregated, it's brutally hard to compete with it. And no supplier has supplier power. I think the biggest chain had like 100 units. And so that's it. When I was telling this to that entrepreneur, he goes, one thing you might not know about me, I was the founder of Fandango. It's like, oh, crap. It sounded so good coming out.
Do you know what, Jeff, though? I'm picturing being in a room with a VC and I'm the founder. And what I can imagine the VC saying is, oh, God, you're going to have to go one by one and acquire each restaurant. Oh, that's going to take time. Oh, that's going to be expensive. Oh, the payback's going to be undetermined. That's a bad model.
Yes, no, absolutely. OpenTable is pretty interesting because it was a long slog before it became an overnight success, because aggregating supply did take time. It was a classic come for the tool, stay for the network play. And so early on in a city, when you're just selling the tool, the productivity enhanced tool, sales were few and far between. And it was a really slow build in each market to get a critical mass of supply such that the diner would be interested in the convenience. You have a subset of supply, but it's so incredibly convenient that I'll use your service. And once the diner started using the service and OpenTable could deliver revenue to the restaurant, sales exploded. So, but I don't disagree with it was a long build.
How did you determine a critical mass of supply side within a specific region?
Well, the good news is we didn't have to. The diner did. They would discover the service, and if they searched, for Saturday night and there are 5 restaurants, they're like, ugh, yawn. If they search on, there's a interesting assortment of restaurants, including some of the ones they know. We typically try to go to the very best restaurants and work our way down. So if French Laundry's on there, you can't book it, but it's on there. That gave some credibility, and it just. There was a tipping point in each market. It's something like 10% of the target market supply, where diners finally said, okay, this is so much more convenient than calling restaurants one at a time, getting put on hold, getting voicemail, getting all this and that. So I'm going to forego the complete selection in lieu of convenience.
This is just random, but I have to ask, how do you think about the paradox of choice, especially when founders are thinking about supply curation? You could have hundreds of restaurants and then people essentially can't decide. We see a lot today where it's like, Jeff, this is your deal of the day or restaurant of the day.
Yeah, I mean, you give tools to be able to once Open Tables was, it's a high quality problem when we had too much supply in a market that affected decision making. But then you just provide the tools to let people go, but by neighborhood, by cuisine, by past favorites, or whatever. You help provide decision making tools such that they can experience the restaurants they want.
You said it's a nice problem to have. You work with some of the best marketplace businesses of our generation. What are the biggest reasons that you see founders fail to acquire the fragmented supply side?
Depth of value prop, I think, probably. I mean, most markets, even successful marketplaces, typically are supply constrained. Airbnb always is looking for new supply to enhance the user experience. And so, it clearly is a value prop. But if the value prop's not robust, it can be very hard to acquire. My partner Andrew Chen wrote the book The Cold Start Problem, which is the hard side of the marketplace. There are a number of them where you have to start with supply because without supply, the demand is uninterested, and so it's really important to get supply right.
How do you think about introducing kind of artificial marketplaces? And what I mean by that is where you suddenly become Netflix and you start creating supply yourself. Or when you are Airbnb and you say, hey, Joe, let's use your new startup's inventory and add that to Airbnb's, and then we own supply as well. How do you think about when you can own both in that manner?
I think it's pretty hard to do that on two-sided marketplaces just because of channel conflict. Take the case of Instacart. They partner with physical grocers to to give them incremental business through the digital mechanism. Now, it would be very easy for Instacart to say, okay, we're going to do drop a warehouse into each city and do ABC grocery. But at that point, you're competing with your customer, and that channel conflict is something that Instacart has no desire to do. They want to be the go-to partner for the physical grocer. So you get some very interesting choices like that. When Netflix made that choice, it was a one-way door. It just worked really well.
It's a tough no turning point, as Jeff Bezos says, one-way door decision. You mentioned channel there, and that was the other element that you said was a crucial element in your kind of desire to see in marketplace businesses, which is like really intelligent lead gen in terms of how they acquire their customers. What do you want to see in how marketplaces acquire their customers? First.
Yeah, let me contrast two things. When I got to Open Table, it was such a good idea. I said, okay, what other industries can I do this in? And owned 100% at the beginning, not what the measly CEO package I got. And the lead gen was really important. If so, say car repair or hair salon, they typically have a customer that is a regular. I go to the same place to get my hair cut each time. If you go and say, I want you to pay me a slice of each transaction, they're going to just say, no, there's free scheduling tools online. Why would I pay you for access to my customer? And so what was wonderful about dining is people crave diversity, the new restaurant, the new different cuisine, this, that. And so because they crave diversity, we often were introducing a diner to a new restaurant, and the restaurant finds high value in that. So if we were just helping the restaurant, digitally enable their own customer, we couldn't have charged what we charged. It was that new customer that they value so much.
Can I ask, how do you think about how new customer acquisition has changed given the rise of TikTok, given the rise of short form video, given the changing landscape that we have today?
The only constant is it's constantly changing. I guess, think of the advent of mobile. It used to be Google had, Google.com had that monopoly. And so you just have to keep your finger on the pulse of, okay, what is new? My partner, Connie Chen, thinks TikTok has a chance, in China is already replacing a lot of the Google use cases, and one of the ones we argue about constantly is restaurant discovery. She says in China, people are discovering restaurants through TikTok. And it's just kind of that's a different use case than I envision for that platform. But then again, if you're a restaurant, you got to stay current and try to figure out, okay, what's the next thing? What's the new thing?
I saw an unbelievable stat, which is like 45% of millennials use TikTok instead of Google as their primary search engine.
Yeah, I
So
mean that's Connie's argument, and so she's she's a smart investor.
can I ask, the boards that you sit on, internally, are you saying, shit, we need to get on video, we need to get on TikTok? Like, what do those conversations look like? Because it's coming so thick and fast. I think
Yeah,
everyone's going to.
you're constantly looking for the new channel. I mean, there has been a duopoly for too long between Google and Facebook, and there's this meme in the venture business that you don't want to fund companies where you're just basically you transfer money to the company and the company transfers money to Facebook and Google. So I am reluctant to invest in companies that require heavy paid marketing to build their audience. The best concepts typically don't need, they're so compelling they don't need to buy users. That's not a categorical rule because TikTok buys users at monstrous scale. But Google early didn't buy many users, Facebook didn't buy many users. Tick 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 tick.
Can I ask, how do you think, I totally get you in terms of not wanting to rely on paid. How do you think about when is the right time to really double down on paid and actually just spend a lot?
I mean, it's when you know your unit economics and you're comfortable that it works. Early on, I was a big proponent of that e-commerce was going to clean the clock of department stores. I got the thesis half right. Share did shift. No one could make money other than Amazon because of there's just no defensibility, no barriers to entry. So look, that mattress in a box company got to 100 million in 8 minutes. Well, so did the other 9, and so then they're all fighting for the same customer on the same channels with the same product, and as a result, the cost of acquisition went up and price is capped because you typically are trying to compete in price, and the movie ends badly. So that's the concern.
What do you do then if, so I totally agree with you, and also on matches your repeat rate's not very high.
Yeah.
There's so many things about this business which suck. But like, what do you do then if you say, you know what, Jeff, me and you're my board member, we're not going to spend, we've got a great customer base that love it, we're going to grow sustainably, but we've got a competitor who's raised from a big institution and they are spending a ton of money and they're going to hoover up all the oxygen just by spending. What do we do then?
You're faced with a super tough choice that's probably informed by the capital environment. In this environment, someone who raised a round and is spending it hard, trying to drive growth, that the sentiment is the pendulum swung a little bit away from that business. We're today counseling our businesses try not to need to go to market for as long as you sustainably can without hurting the business. 3 years ago, it was spend. There's an environment where there's unlimited capital behind you. So, you get the Uber Lyft situation where, billions of dollars went into the building of those two businesses. And they're in the United States, they compete with each other. So, it's a bit of a hamburger hill, I think is the phrase. We use.
I've never heard of Hamburger Hill. Point being though, Jeff, like if we're just being blunt, I think I saw a stat like 97% of the money that's gone into Uber will not return 1x, just given the quantum of money. Point being, capital efficiency is so key. And I'm gonna get so much shit for this, Jeff. None of the businesses that we're looking at are very capital efficient in marketplaces. Actually, I'm sorry, you're going to crush me.
Disagree. I'd put two out there. Airbnb raised way less money than the other leading marketplaces at the time. It's got a couple characteristics that are very nice. One of which is they get paid in advance. And so, when you make your summer vacation over the holidays, you're giving Airbnb money, and so they didn't need much money because they were actually cash flow positive very early, even before they were cash flow positive before they were operating income positive. Incredible Health has that same characteristics. Hospitals are paying for nurse seats in advance. Hey, I'm going to ask you to hire 100 nurses over the next year, and they pay for those seats in advance. And so Incredible Health went, we did the A, they went 3 years without raising while the business was going very well. And when Iman finally did raise earlier this year, she had more cash in the bank when she raised than she did after we funded her. And so that positive cash transaction is one thing that, some rare marketplace businesses do have, and we value it highly.
So that's a really interesting granular trait that I would then look for in marketplaces, which is a delayed duration between payment and execution. And bluntly, I'm going to get in trouble for this, but I care less more and more about getting in trouble these days, which is great fun. Uber, Instacart's, Deliveroo's, if you look at the time between payment and execution or action, it's very quick. It's 10, 20 minutes. And then Airbnb, Incredible Health, it's much longer. So essentially, I'm just being blunt, you're the master here. Are these businesses much better where there's a much greater payment time between because of the liquidity that one gets and can invest?
There are tons of features that we look for in business. That the get paid in advance is very rare, but when you see it, I've come to value it heavily, just because it changes the capital efficiency. Iman at Incredible had just had this dream. She called it A to IPO. She arguably could have never raised a B round and gone public. The business has that kind of momentum. And because she was, quote unquote, accidentally profitable, the bookings came in way faster than, particularly coming out of COVID, than any of us anticipated. She literally could have gone A to IPO. That is a pretty rare characteristic.
Why did she decide not to?
There's a point at which the business was valued at a level where the safety of having additional money in the bank outweighed the incremental dilution. And she published the price she raised at. When you raise at 1.65 billion, I think our round was 60 post. You're not taking a lot of dilution.
I would take it. Good idea. Yeah, really good idea. That's one of those rounds where as an investor, you're like, take the money, take the money. I want to dive into actually the demand side now. We mentioned a little bit on the paid channels. When we think about kind of big mistakes that we see founders make, I think one of the biggest is actually messaging and making it resonate with the target customer. I find that many really struggle with this. First, I guess, do you agree? And second, how do you advise founders on really making that initial message resonate with the first cohort of users?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super important, and one of the reasons I still do what I do is I get to learn from my founders too. Watching Brian Chesky and the founding team there refine the Airbnb messaging over the years to the point now where I actually think it's a spectacular brand that's current, positive, it's on the right things. Just watching them continually to refine and hone in on the essence of the business was just a fascinating exercise for me. That it was not my core strength, and watching them get it right on a sustained basis, I learned a ton.
So I would love your advice on that one. That seems like a really hard messaging stance.
It's a really hard messaging.
It's so horizontal. You've got my mum and you've got very cool young people. Not that my mum's not cool or young, but how do you advise founders when it's a horizontal play on the messaging?
Well, think of the challenge they have. You have strangers staying in other strangers, places. Trust and safety incidents, can happen. They happen in hotels at a very predictably high rate, and so they have to message to make something pretty at first listen fairly alien and scary into something enticing. And I think they've done a great job of it. Belong anywhere, live like a local. It's their messages are one of community more than hospitality.
One thing that I often advise founders is be so specific. Choose people who love fishing and also love protein snacks at the same time. So specific that it seems outrageous, and then slowly expand.
Yep.
Do you agree with that extreme specificity? And how would you respond then to founders who say, yeah, but then I go to VCs and they say, oh, it's not a big enough market?
You know, we strive as a firm not to base investment decisions on current market size, because a lot of the best businesses create new markets. And so I looked at eBay when Jeff Skoll wrote the business plan for eBay with Pierre, and I got a copy of it when I joined the business, and they were focused entirely on the collectibles market. Now, their argument was the collectibles market in the U.S. I think was a $10 billion or $100 billion market, and they were going to own that market. And so when Bob Cagle at Benchmark wrote the check, he was investing in a collectibles marketplace. Now, what happened is users found the utility and just said, "That's a great utility," and they started listing things out. We started in collectibles. The collectible messages got honed, and then people said, "Oh, this has utility beyond collectibles." And they started using it that way. And the best motion we had to grow the business was watch what the users were doing and double down on it. So when Simon Rothman was there, he was an early employee, and he loved collectible cars, and I think he searched for Lamborghini, and 2 real ones showed up. That was the beginning of eBay Motors. It's like, why are Lamborghinis on the site? And then you say, okay, because they're only sold in large coastal cities. What if you want a Lamborghini and you're not in a large coastal city? So eBay became a mechanism for that, for computers, for sporting goods, and so the most successful growth strategy we had back in the day was just look what people were listing and then try to enable it to be found on a much more systemic basis.
I'm so pleased you said about market size there. I agree with you. The one I don't like to take risk on is market timing. I just always am wary of, the intelligence of the market and my naivety. Do you take market timing risk?
Yeah, we always take market timing risk. In a recent blog, I stole a Mark phrase. There are no bad ideas, only bad timing. So, you look
Fantastic. But then you don't take market timing risk.
No, but at some point you pile in and just say, I think it's now time, or this is the right approach. I remember I diligenced Instacart with the lead investor in the prior round, which is Mike Moritz. So I go, Mike, talk to me. Webvan was a pretty sustained failure, and he just goes, oh. I go, what's that? He goes, I was an investor in Webvan. And then he came back with Instacart 10, 15 years later, and fairly similar similar consumer proposition, digital groceries, different execution, and by the way, it worked a whole lot better with a mobile phone. I don't think you could do Instacart without a mobile phone, because getting the shopper, both what do I pick, where do I go, that whole thing would be torturous without that device.
Listen, I've invested in groceries in Pakistan in Airlift, which sadly did not work out. Not to the surprise of some people. My question to you is, how do you retain mental plasticity when you see something from your operating career that didn't work, or you have an investment that doesn't work, and then like Mike, he did Webvan and then he did Instacart. How do you retain mental plasticity as an investor to not be jaded by prior experience?
Well, the good news on that is you fail a whole lot, and that's pretty humbling. And then, I spend a lot of time going back and looking, trying to, do the Annie Duke thing of, it's not the outcome, it's the quality of the decision. And then, why did I make this decision? What did I get right? What did I get wrong? Or I mentioned early on, I was doing DTC e-commerce before it was even called DTC. It was just it's differentiated from Amazon, because they have their own brand, and it's not sold on Amazon and all that stuff. And then that basket got is resulted in an uninspiring set of outcomes. And I actually got 2 of the best e-commerce companies out there, Fanatics and Zulily, and it still is an uninspiring outcome. And you're kind of like, okay, why is that uninspiring? And that's where I kind of doubled down on the LTV to CAC. If it's not the need to buy users at scale typically the economics erode, and so that developed the thesis on, okay, I am leaning out on heavy paid acquisition businesses. And it was through just pattern recognition, trying to assess, okay, why did this decision not work like I wanted it to, and what can I learn of it going forward? So over 11 years of investing, there's been a lot of failure / learnings that hopefully I now incorporate. But you cannot stop that plasticity, or you're just going to kill as an investor.
Yeah, it's very, very hard. I think it's one of the biggest challenges. You said about kind of the reliance on paid there and like the challenges that come from it. When we think about the other big challenges in terms of acquiring demand, what are some of the biggest that you work with founders most often on in the early days when it comes to acquiring that initial demand side?
Trying to get the initial product market fit is really hard. Andrew wrote a book on it. There's the cold start problem, the hard side, all this. You're constantly saying, okay, how are we feeling? How's it going? And then if there is a point at which it's like, okay, we're feeling great. Let's put the chips on the table and start playing for real. Early on, it's a lot of experimentation on both sides of the marketplace. Who is this resonating with best? I do like your start with a narrow zealot-like community and serve them well. Airbnb started with the younger consumer, and then they've added use cases on top of that. And now it's a pretty mass market brand. But when it was started, it was 20-something Gen Z travelers who like both community and budget. It was a less expensive alternative.
So Jeff, I'm a marketplace founder in this hypothetical scenario. We had a great first meeting and you were like, yeah, I'd really like to see your cohorts. And I go, great, I'm going to send them over to you. I send over my cohorts to you. Where do you zoom in? What do you want to see? What excites you when you look at those cohorts?
The steepness of the decline, or is there a decline? And then how are they trending over time? So in the case of Instacart, the number of users declined pretty precipitously from first purchase to 10th purchase. A year out, the number of users declined something like 3/4. But the users that stayed spent 3 or 4 times more money. So their cohorts were actually on revenue basis were close to staying at 100%. You look at that and you're like, okay, that's pretty good. And then when are new cohorts declining or improving relative to older cohorts? I put a lot of interest in that. If they're constantly improving, it could be a sign of a network effect. Just like, okay, this business is improving because definition of network effect is the more people use it, the more valuable it is. So if more people are using it, it's become more valuable. It's going to show up in the cohort curve.
One thing I think about a lot is actually negative network effects, which I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts on. A great example of this is like in London we have what you have it with GoPuff. In London we have a ton of these, and you actually have negative network effects, which is like increased demand means that supply side is so overwhelmed that the quality gets worse. They have multi-stop delivery, and actually it's a worse experience, and then you kind of tail off and you lose customers because of that. How do you think about that negative network effect? I'm fascinated. You're on the board of Instacart.
Yeah. I mean, Instacart is at a scale where they can do faster delivery with some economic. With both service integrity and economics that make sense to the company. Trying to do that without the base of business that Instacart was built at, it was really hard. We didn't make a bet in fast commerce. That's one where some of us internet veterans remember Cosmo and.
Oh my God! Yeah.
Our concern was it's Cosmo redo without anything really new on top of it. So we did not place a bet in that sector.
Well done, saving money. That was a good decision. Can I ask you though? Like a lot of times we've spoken about Instacart. We've spoken many people who do argue in favor of these models. They say yes, you have inherently bad unit economics in the early days, but at scale, at critical mass, at density, they look fantastic in terms of the unit economics. How do you think about mentally projecting yourself forward to a time when they are good? and how long you can stomach just getting pounded by shit unit economics.
The prototype on this for me was Instacart. When I from recollection, they were billing something like $10 or $12 per order when we invested, and they were losing $20-$25 per order on each one, and you're sitting there like, okay, this is hemorrhaging money in a business where the conventional wisdom is you're never going to be able to do it economically. So I went right back to the entrepreneur, Purva, and said, okay, you're losing a lot of money per order. How do you square the equation? And this was one where I think there was good founder product fit. Purva was a fulfillment engineer at Amazon and is just wired to continuous improvement. And he sketched out a roadmap for how he was going to make the economics work by type. There a couple of the big ones by recollection are ads were clearly huge, high revenue business. Once we get to scale, we provide performance marketing to CPGs. That's valuable. Second was deals with the grocers where they would give Instacart a cut of economics, then scale, and then improvement. An example of this: early on in Instacart, the shoppers picked the products and waited in the line with all the other consumers. As they got bigger, they were able to go to the grocers and said, "Can you give us a dedicated line, a dedicated aisle, so our shoppers are not sitting there waiting?" Then they developed a software that as the picker's picking with some grocers, they developed the trust that the picker would just scan the product. The basket is on the phone, and Instacart paid the grocer directly, so they never had to even stand in line. Each of those took many minutes off of each order, and time is money, and so that's just the example of the kind of continuous optimizations they were making, trying to take minutes and seconds out of the process, and in doing that, they've gotten to the point now where they are significantly profitable.
I thought it was fascinating. I spoke to you before this show actually on email about Barry at Peloton, who spoke about actually Netflix and how they use the discovery engine to get better margins because they could direct you towards content where they have better margin profiles.
Yep.
And then with the decline in traffic that they would show the people with better margins, they would say, hey, we're shifting all traffic away from you, and use it as a kind of barrier and like, hey, bluntly reduce your margins or we're going to crush you.
That it sounds like it's called market power.
Yeah, that was brilliant from Barry. Can I ask, a lot of times, we look at like CACs, especially for a lot of these businesses, and they're pretty volatile. How much weight do you place on CACs, given how much they change over time?
The concern I have on CACs is they typically go up, in my experience, as you try to scale the acquisition. And part of that could be competitive dynamics. If you're paying the 10 mattress in a box customers trying to find the same consumer, and so for me, I look at a CAC and I assume it's only going to go up. So if the LTV to CAC is tight, it's definitely a cause for significant concern. If it's enormous, like I have a 20-to-1 LTV to CAC, it's like okay, I can stomach that. If it's 2. That's a big problem. If it's 4, I'm still leaning way back just because they erode, and it's not in your power.
How do you think channel spend changes over the next year, given the macro? I think a lot of people forget that you're always competing against everyone when it comes to channel spend, but the demand will go down, especially with less venture investment, less liquidity in the ecosystem. How does channel spend change, and how do CACs change over the next year, do you think?
It's been pretty volatile, to say the least. The Apple changes with the impact on Facebook, TikTok, and Pinterest, and Snap coming as potential new channels. The privacy stuff is, both Facebook and Google are using the data from their ecosystem to their advantage, and lots of regulators around the world are getting increasingly concerned on that practice. So I think it's going to be super volatile. Even without the potential recession impact, and so you've got to as an entrepreneur, you got to be constantly, reviewing, saying, okay, what's happening on this channel? What new channels can I try? I love the companies that have they segregate an experimental budget from their core acquisition budget. Just because if you bundle them together, it is a barrier against experimentation. If you're constantly optimizing Google and Facebook, but you're trying TikTok and Pinterest and Snap from Insta from a different budget, it promotes that channel diversity attempt.
I find that people try and get too cute with channels, Jeff. They try and diversify too early. If Google or Facebook's working and you're scaling well, just go. Like, don't get cute. Do you agree, or do you think actually diversification is important?
I think there's a point at which it pays to start experimenting. Early, I agree with you. Just if the dog's hunting, keep it going. But over time, as you look to scale and look to diversify your dependence on two mega platforms, I do encourage experimentation.
The element that we've spoken about, demand and supply, bringing them together, what have been your biggest lessons in terms of maintaining equilibrium between the two varying levels of demand and supply?
That's like the whole game. You have to figure out, because I have a belief that the demand side is the more strategic side, because suppliers typically will go wherever the demand is, and so for me, keeping a healthy demand bucket is what your suppliers are looking for. Because if I list my place on Airbnb and I get and it's 60% occupied and I make a bunch of money, I'm going to continue using Airbnb. If I go through that agony and I get 2 orders a year, it's not worth it to me. So for me, healthy demand results in healthy marketplace typically.
When we spoke before about marketplaces, you said that you liked or had interest in kind of unbundling Craigslist with blue collar jobs, home services, rentals. And I respectfully read this and thought I must be an idiot. But why? Like, Belsky tried it, Joe Fernandez tried it, like all these people who are good tried it, and it did not work.
There's no bad ideas, only bad timing. So I mean, it's if you literally go, that famous graphic, the internet meme with here's Craigslist homepage and here are all here's the new code that killed that category. Here's a new code that killed that: ride share, home share, just the dating, goods. There are only 3 left, and they're big fat ones. And I agree with you. No one has conquered it yet. But there's no bad ideas, only bad timing.
Do you not think the reason why they're the 3 remaining is because they remain the core human relationships that you have? Which is, hey, you have the painter in your phone book. You have the decorator in the phone book. Like they come on. It's like Odesk or Elance or any of these businesses. They suck because the leakage is so real.
I think there is a real issue with leakage. The other is issue with frequency. Except for lawn care and home cleaning, almost all services are very, very infrequent, and it's very hard to build a brand. I mean, typically what you remembered is you searched it on Google and then found it. That you don't remember that, it came from X came from Y. So that's, I think, been the challenge there. And then for those frequency ones, you do want to cut out the middleman. So I do think there are significant challenges. I also find myself often in, God, I need someone to fix the X. And so, I would love a brand that I could find, high quality contractors through, because I don't have the gutter specialist in my Rolodex.
Do you take the view that, hey, entrepreneurs find white spaces, come at me with anything? Or do you go, this market is ripe now for X, I'm looking for people to build in this market?
It's kind of a meeting between the two. You send out bat signals, and the reason we publish content is you're trying to send out bat signals saying this is what I'm interested in. This is what I'm looking for. I have a thesis, and then you're looking for founders. Ideally, come to you with companies that try to address what your bat signal is for. I remember the shortest blog I ever wrote was about early in the on-demand economy. about, hey, you can have convenience, you can have economics. The ones we're looking for have both. And Apurva at Instacart read it and came and talked to me during his fundraise. I was late, but he saw the bat signal. I go, hey, why'd you reach out? He goes, I saw your blog, and you're like, okay, the bat signal works.
That works. That's the power of content, my friend. Well, welcome to my cell.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to talk a little bit about your style before we move into a quick fire round. When you think about your style as a board member, I spoke to many founders that you're on the board of. How would you describe your style of board membership, Jeff?
I think there are issues that the board should be involved in, and there are issues that they shouldn't be involved in. I had a board member at OpenTable who wanted to design the product, and that for me was not a productive board activity. So you try to keep on the topics that the board is there, and then you try to add value in a surgical way and in an empathetic way. Just kind of, I've been in that chair. That is a hard chair. So I'm not going to, I very rarely, I aspire not to come across as sharp, critical, you just surgically pick the topics where you think, it makes sense to opine and you have something to say. I mean, there's a Grateful Dead lyric, please don't dominate the rap jack if you got nothing new to say. Way too many board members just talk for airtime. And, I try not to be that person.
What can founders do to generate and build the best relationship of trust with their board?
The most important thing is pick your board members selectively. The founder who comes in, gets 10 term sheets, spends an hour with each of the GPs and then picks one. I don't know how you're actually picking your boss potentially for a decade or more. Spend a little time thinking about it, getting them to know them. Do we, share the same values? Do we have the same vision? Be selective in whose money you take would be the biggest advice.
I agree, Jeff. We both invested in very compressed timelines over the last 24 months. I didn't. Many entrepreneurs didn't. I guess you didn't, because otherwise you just lost every deal. Oh, Jeff, I want a month getting to know you. Well, I'm deciding next week.
A month, it's hard to get the month. It is, the fun. You experience this. It's the job of hurry up and wait. You're just kissing frogs. Something comes in, and then you just have to, you have to dive on it and spend it. So we try to get as much time with the entrepreneurs as we can, even in the compressed time frames. You're doing dinner. We're do our reverse pitch. You're just trying to make that personal judgment on a compressed time frame, because that is the reality of the market. I try not to write checks in one day, but the market often doesn't give you a month, and if it's a month, it's often an adverse signal. So it's that they can't raise.
I think there's a lot of misalignments between VCs and founders that we don't talk about. What do you think are the biggest misalignments between founders and VCs?
I think the biggest one is VCs have a portfolio, and the founders have an N of one. And so, I try to be very explicit on that. The founder says, "Okay, I have a fork in the road. What's your point of view on where I should go?" And it's just like, listen, just so you know, I have a portfolio. Because of that, I'm willing to. I'm attracted to the riskier but higher upside one. You don't have a portfolio. And so that's an important, different alignment. And let's be completely upfront on that.
When you think about the boards that you sit on, who's the best board member that you sit on a board with, and why them?
I'm privileged at this point to be with a lot of very good board members. The team at Pinterest, the team at Airbnb, the team at Instacart are both, have all gotten, very, very high quality folks, and they're filled with folks who kind of have the same philosophy I have. Don't dominate the rap if you got nothing new to say.
I spoke to Alfred Lin before the show, and he mentioned your walks during COVID on Sundays. What do you think makes Alfred a very good board member?
I think he's very thoughtful. He does his work. He's got unique insights. It's been a pleasure partnering with him at Airbnb. So I'm a big fan.
It was very funny. I asked him what your weakness was, and he said the biggest weakness Jeff has is he works with a competitor.
We hold Sequoia in high regard. They're very good at what they do.
Final one for you. A lot of young VCs listen to the show. What advice would you give to young board members who are assuming their first board roles?
watch what seasoned board members do. Is that person adding value? If so, how are they doing it, and and why? Just model what's on there. I remember my first board. It was Hotwire, and with David Bonderman's on it of TPG, and the ex-head of Sabre was on it, and so I just watched fascinating on what do these guys, very experienced people, do on boards, and then there's the contra example where someone's just driving you crazy because they're designing product in the board meeting, and it's so pay attention.
I want to move into a quick fire. So I say a short statement, Jeff. You give me your immediate thoughts. Does that sound okay?
Sounds good. What
book would you most recommend to the audience?
There are two I read recently, both on race relations, both on sports. One was Major Taylor, and the other is I Come as a Shadow by John Thompson, his autobiography. I found both fascinating because of both the sports and the racial topics. It really makes race in America come alive.
What's been the best change to happen internally at Andreessen over the last 1 to 2 years?
We're hell-bent on world domination, and the number of new funds and new areas we're investing in is fascinating. It's crypto, it's bio, it's games, it just keeps going.
What's the worst change that's happened?
The exact same thing, because the firm's gotten huge. So we're over 400 people, and in COVID and post-COVID, it's hard to get to know your coworkers. So it's become large.
December 2023, will we be in a better or a worse macro place?
You plan for worse and you hope for better.
What do you believe that many around you disbelieve?
At eBay, we had this phrase, people are basically good. I do believe that. I love the companies, businesses that work for economic empowerment for the communities. Airbnb, Chef, Sniff Spot, eBay.
Tell me, what do you know now that you wish you'd known when you started in venture day one at Andreessen?
To the saying before, made so many mistakes. I was looking for a new learning curve. After it shallowed a lot as an operator, I found a new learning curve.
What was the hardest thing to learn? Mine is getting comfortable with wasted time. Like, if you're an operator, you spend a day doing something, you have a day's output. Here, we could meet 10 entrepreneurs. Oh, yeah. Shit.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I forget what I was going. That's hit rate. It is so hard to. You're a spectacular investor if half your companies create value, which means half your companies don't create value, and that hit rate. If you're batting 500 as an operator, you're an ex-operator.
What's your hit rate, Jeff?
I'm not allowed to talk about that. We're RIAs.
Oh, right. Yeah, sorry. There's some things where I'm just really naive and I'm like, oh, wow. Okay, well, fair enough. Tell me, who's the most underrated angel in the ecosystem? When you're like, I want to bring them in. Who do you want to bring in?
With the Lookout co-founder, quietly has built quite an impressive little portfolio. So I was not smart enough to invest in him until his fourth fund, but hopefully I can correct that.
What's the biggest miss, and how did it impact your process?
The biggest miss, I think, was I had an opportunity to do DoorDash early, and I loved Tony as a founder. I had a thesis on the food delivery market that there's no defensible barrier to entry, and that the end state was restaurants with 20 iPads, taking orders from everyone. So I think I made, this is Andy Duke again, I think I made the right decision. It worked out badly. I did not anticipate Travis getting capped at Uber Eats, and then the level of consolidation that happened in the industry, and DoorDash, Tony created a very valuable product in DoorDash.
Why did Uber Eats tail off?
My read is DoorDash out executed in the post-Travis world.
Yeah, no, I agree. Emil Michael agrees too. What's the best investment advice you've ever received?
Don't bet on current market size, bet on future market size.
Final one. What's the most recent publicly announced investment, and why did you get so excited?
It's Cody, which is a marketplace for commercial real estate that seeks to tear up the incredibly awkward, for Newco's, 7-year lease, and lets you lease space a couple days a week. It's on a 9-month term instead of the 7-year term for offsites. It's just making commercial real estate liquid. And post pandemic, that looks like that's an option that, by the way, a bunch of my companies have already availed themselves of. When you describe, okay, you don't have to do a 7-year lease, you can do a 12-month lease. You people kind of go, where do I sign?
We spoke to them before the show. Yeah. But Jeff, listen, I've loved this. Thank you so much for your time today, and you've been a great guest.
My pleasure, Harry. Thank you for inviting me.